Imagine, just for a moment, the comforting hush of early morning, not in your bed, but in a world untouched by steel or glass or electricity. You wake not to the chime of an alarm, but to the soft crackle of a dying fire and the scent of smouldering wood and damp stone. Shadows play across a cave's uneven ceiling above you, ancient, protective, and cold to the touch. Outside, the hush of wind in tall grasses, the low, distant call of something wild. You are no longer in the present. You are somewhere in the deep past, somewhere in the Stone Age. This is not a time of kings or castles or cathedrals. There are no written records, no names carved into monuments, and yet life unfolds with its own rhythm, a rhythm slower, quieter, persistent. Tonight, let us step into that rhythm. In this episode of Boring History to Sleep, we'll drift back tens of thousands of years to explore what it might feel like to wake up in a Stone Age cave. We'll move gently through the textures of daily life, the subtle beauty of ancient tools, the mysteries of early culture and belief. You'll meet the nameless people whose lives flickered across millennia, like flames that warmed a circle of hunters huddled against the cold. So breathe in slowly, let the world fall away, and join me on a journey to the far, far past where stone meets fire, and sleep waits just beyond the flicker of a torchlight. Your eyes adjust to the grey-blue half-light filtering through the cave's entrance. The air is cool, still holding the damp of the night. Beneath your resting body, the packed earth is softened by layers of dried grasses, animal furs, and perhaps a woven mat of reed scratchy against the skin, but far better than bare stone. Somewhere nearby, the soft rustle of another sleeper stirring, wrapped in the same animal hide as you. This is your home. For now, a temporary shelter among many, depending on the season. A limestone hollow in the side of a low hill, protected from wind and rain. Smoke clings to the cave ceiling, faintly marking the passing of days, as fires are lit and extinguished again and again. Outside, the day begins with simplicity. The morning routine of Stone Age life is not rushed. There is no clock, no appointments, no digital chime reminding you to move. The work of survival, though constant, is familiar, repeated, grounded in necessity. You might gather your few belongings: a stone knife, a piece of flint, a pouch made from stitched hide, and prepare for the tasks of the day. Food is a priority. Perhaps you are part of a small band of 30, 40 people. You know their voices, their footsteps, the sound of their laughter. You recognize the way they breathe when they sleep. The hearth is cold now. The embers need coaxing. A patient process. Arrange the dried grass. Strike flint against a piece of iron, rich rock. Angle your breath just right. The flicker of flame is never taken for granted. It is warmth. It is cooking. It is safety. Breakfast, if it can be called that, is likely simplesome dried berries, maybe a shred of smoked meat preserved from a recent kill. There is no table, no dishware. You eat with your hands. The smells are earthy, strong. Smoke, sweat, hide, and the faint tang of stone and ash. These smells are constant companions. When the fire is going again, the smoke curls lazily upward, pooling near the ceiling before drifting outward. A few voices murmur low those who woke before you. They speak in a language that would be utterly alien to the modern ear, yet filled with meaning. Perhaps it's not even fully a language yet. Maybe it's a collection of clicks, hums, gestures, and shared memory. But it works. You venture outside. The light is soft, dappled by morning mist. The grasses sway gently. Far in the distance, shapes move, perhaps deer, perhaps danger. You squint, not with fear, but with caution. The Stone Age does not forgive those who forget to be careful. Water is needed. You and a few others walk together toward the streamer journey you know well. Along the way, you pass familiar landmarks. A pile of unusual rocks, a bent tree, the faint scratch marks on a stone that someone made long ago for reasons now forgotten. Time flows slowly here, but it still passes. There are no tools of metal. Your hands know how to shape wood, bone, and stone. Maybe today you'll spend the morning reflaking a broken spearhead. The delicate, precise tapping of flint against antler is oddly meditative. The flakes fall like eggshells, whisper thin and sharp. Clothing is practical, hides sewn with sinew. You may wear a necklace made of carved bone or a fragment of tooth worn smooth by handling. Not decorative, not exactly. Symbolic, perhaps. Maybe it reminds you of a successful hunt, or a lost friend. By midday, the cave is busy. Those who stayed behind prepare gathered roots or work on tanning hides, scraping them with sharpened stones. Children, if there are any, play nearby, mimicking the tasks of their elders. Their laughter, rare but pure, breaks the monotony like sunlight through trees. And as the sun arcs overhead, you feel it. The rhythm of life here. It is slow, repetitive, and focused entirely on the present. There is no excess, no distraction, just the next task, and the next. As we leave this gentle rhythm behind, let us drift forward, slightly, into the life of a specific figure, a person whose bones might tell us their story, whose survival tells us about a world long gone. Let us now shift from the broad rhythm of daily life to the quiet footsteps of one individual, a woman, not one whose name is remembered, for there were no names written down, but she lived, breathed, and endured perhaps 30,000 years ago. We know of her not through words, but through her bones, uncovered in the soft ochre soil of a limestone cave in what is now southern France. Archaeologists call her the woman of Abri-Pateau. You might imagine her waking as you did, with the ash of the fire still warm beside her, her breath visible in the cool morning air. She was not old when she died, no more than 25, but by then her body had already carried the weight of life in a harsh and shifting world. She would have been strong, by necessity, her arms capable of scraping hides for hours, her hands practiced in the work of preparing food, repairing tools, and carrying burdens across distances long enough to make a modern walker pause. Her teeth were worn, not from age but from use chewing tough sinew, cracking bone to extract marrow, holding threads of sinew while sewing with bone needles. There is no portrait of her, but through study of her remains, we know she stood just over 5 feet tall. Her bones were dense, well used. There are signs of injury-healed fractures in her ribs, perhaps from a fall, perhaps from an encounter with something wild. Life was not unkind, but it was unrelenting. She lived among others, not alone. Her people moved with the seasons, following the migrations of animals, the blooming of plants. There would have been companion sisters, cousins, perhaps her own child. She may have painted, though we cannot know for certain. The walls of nearby caves still bear red and ochre figures. Mammoths, horses, human hands. Were hers among them? Around her bones, archaeologists found ornaments beads shaped from ivory and pierced with tools as delicate as any modern needle. These were not just adornments. They were signs of care, of identity, of connection, worn close to the skin, perhaps over many years, polished smooth by the movement of breath and heart. When she died, she was buried. That, in itself, is remarkable. In a time when survival was uncertain and resources scarce, to bury someone was a powerful choice. It meant time was taken, a grave was dug, tools and ornaments placed with her. Her body was arranged with care. Perhaps there was a ceremony, a wordless goodbye under the fading light. Her grave was dust and stone for thousands of years, until the modern world peeled back the layers and found her again, not to disturb, but to listen. Her silence tells a story not of fame or war or invention, but of existence, of presence in a time we barely remember. And so, as you rest now, imagine her walking across the frost-hardened ground, her breath soft in the morning light, her eyes scanning the horizon. No history books record her, but she lived, as real as you, and through her, the Stone Age becomes a little less distant, a little more human. Now, let us drift from this single life into something more elusive, the echoes of ancient belief, the soft mystery of signs carved into stone, and the quiet reverence of those who once painted in darkness by torchlight. Step softly now, deeper into the cavern, not the one you awoke in, but another, older, and sacred in its stillness. The walls close in gently, the air is heavy, hushed. Your torch flickers against ancient stone, its light dancing over shapes long hidden from the sun. This is a place of mystery and memory. Here, in this underground cathedral of shadow and silence, are the earliest known expressions of human thought. Images painted tens of thousands of years ago, by hands that held nothing digital, nothing metallic, just pigment, breath, and time. The walls come alive with ochre and charcoal. There are horses, their backs arched mid-gallop, bison with massive shoulders rendered in bold curves, deer with antlers like branches stretching outward into the dark. The painters understood movement, volume, even perspective tools we associate with much later ages. But these artists lived in what we call the Paleolithic. The Lascaux cave in France is one of the most famous sites. It remained untouched for over 17,000 years, until it was stumbled upon in 1940 by children chasing a dog. Within, nearly 600 painted figures reveal a world of artistic devotion and cryptic purpose. But why did they paint these images? And why here, in the depths of the earth, far from the light of day? We cannot know for certain. Theories drift like smoke. Perhaps they were part of hunting rituals to summon good fortune, or acts of devotion to animal spirits, or to a force beyond comprehension. Some researchers believe the caves were places of trance and transformation, echoing with the beat of drums or the rhythm of chant. The silence here, so deep and vast, may once have pulsed with ceremony. Near some paintings, we find hand stencils outlines created by blowing pigment over an outstretched hand pressed to the rock. They are haunting in their simplicity, not a picture of something else, but a mark of self, a whisper of presence. I was here, it seems to say. Remember me. Some of the symbols are even more abstract. Dots, zigzags, grids, some carved into the stone, some painted. Were they an early form of communication? A proto-writing system? Or simply decorations with meanings now lost to time? The mystery lingers. There is something deeply human in this need to mark the world, to leave behind a message, even when no one is listening. The caves speak of patience, of quiet skill, of reverence. The artists would have worked by flickering torchlight in the breathless dark. They mixed pigments from crushed minerals, charcoal, even ground bones bound with fat or water, applied with brushes made from fur or moss, or simply with fingers, and they returned to the same places, generation after generation. The oldest cave paintings we know, like those in El Castillo in Spain, may be more than 40,000 years old, older than the pyramids, older than agriculture, older, even, than many of the words we speak. Yet here they are, vivid and quiet, waiting in the dark. As you imagine these painted walls, dimly lit and echoing with ancient steps, allow yourself to drift further into the mindset of these early people. Their lives were not only survival, but filled with meaning, expressed not in writing or speech, but in the careful placement of pigment, the slow shaping of stone, the silent language of images. And now, let us turn our thoughts toward the structure of society. What did it mean to be a leader, a child, a hunter, or a maker in these ancient bands of people? How did they differ from one another, if they did at all? In the quiet rhythms of Stone Age life, there is a notable absence. No palaces, no thrones, no glittering empires, or carved monuments to power. And yet, there was society. Imagine sitting once more near the fire. The flames flicker low as twilight settles. Around you are others, perhaps a dozen, perhaps 40. Each one has a place, not defined by wealth or title, but by skill, memory, and contribution. This was a world before social classes, before formal rule, a world where leadership was fluid, and power, if it existed at all, was shared. Stone Age societies were typically egalitarian, that is to say, they were organized not around hierarchy, but around necessity. Food had to be gathered, children had to be cared for, tools had to be made. The strongest did not necessarily rule, and the oldest were not always in charge, but age and experience were valued. Those who remembered where to find the flint, where the herds would pass, when the rains would fall, they were listened to. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer groups such as the Kung of the Kalahari or the Hadza of Tanzania suggest that decision-making was often consensual, with no permanent chief or ruler. Disagreements might be resolved through discussion, or simply by moving apart for a time. There were few possessions to fight over, and no locked doors. This is not to suggest life was harmonious or simple, but it was balanced in ways that would seem unfamiliar today. There was no rich and poor, no landowners, no taxation. The group worked together because to do otherwise was to risk the survival of all. Yet, even in the absence of formal hierarchy, there were roles. The skilled toolmaker was admired. The successful hunter was respected. The healer, who knew which roots soothed pain and which leaves closed wounds, was essential. Children were raised not by parents alone, but by the group. Elders passed down stories not in books, but in gesture, rhythm, and memory. Songs and dances may have carried knowledge across generations. And gender roles, while present, were not always rigid. There is evidence that both men and women took part in hunting, in crafting, in decision-making. One remarkable burial site in the Andes revealed a young woman buried with a full hunting toolkit, challenging the long-held assumption that only men hunted in prehistoric times. Life required adaptability. Survival respected capability. But there were contrasts. The very young and the very old may have been more vulnerable. Injuries, if serious, could change a person's role forever. Those who could no longer walk far or carry weight may have stayed behind, tending fire or caring for children. And while there were no empires, there were likely networks. Groups met, traded goods, shared stories, perhaps even exchanged partners between clans to strengthen bonds. A carved shell found deep inland suggests travel or trade. A pigment used in a far-off cave matches minerals from hundreds of kilometers away. These quiet signs hint at a world not of isolation, but of connection, an invisible web of movement, exchange, and relationship. In this society, to be part of the group was to survive. To be excluded was dangerous. There were no written laws, no prisons, but there were surely customs, stories that taught right and wrong, and social expectations, as real and binding as any written code. And as you rest now, picture that fire circle once more its glow casting long shadows. No throne, no king, but a quiet, enduring order shaped not by power, but by presence. Now, let us shift our gaze toward technology, not as we know it today, with wires and screens but through stone, bone, and the clever ingenuity that allowed early humans to survive and thrive. In the quiet hours of a Stone Age afternoon, the flick of flint against bone is a familiar sound, a rhythm, a practiced motion. Tap, tap, flake. A fine sliver of stone falls to the ground like a curled petal. This is not crude work. It is craft. It is knowledge passed silently, through careful observation and the memory of fingers. The term Stone Age conjures simplicity, but in truth, these early tools were anything but. They were precise, efficient, and deeply adapted to their makers' needs. Our ancestors were engineers of necessity, shaping the world with what they had: stone, wood, bone, sinew, hide, and fire. Let us begin with stone tools, the hallmark of the age. The earliest, known as Oldowan tools, were simple flakes chipped from river pebbles sharp enough to butcher an animal or split a root. But over thousands of years, techniques evolved. The Acheulean hand axe, shaped like a teardrop, appears in sites across Africa, Europe, and Asia. It was symmetrical, balanced, and effective, a multi-purpose tool carried like a trusted companion. By the time of the Upper Paleolithic, the techniques had grown more sophisticated. Flint knappers used antler or bone to strike stone at just the right angle, peeling off long, thin blades. These blades could be reshaped into scrapers, awls, or barbs for spears. Some were tiny microliths assembled into composite tools like knives or arrows. But stone was only part of the story. Bone and antler were carved into fish hooks, needles, and harpoon points. These materials were lighter and more flexible, ideal for delicate or precise work. The invention of the sewing needle, with an eye carved into one end, is a quiet marvel of human creativity. With it, hides could be stitched into fitted clothing, warm, protective, and durable. Fire, of course, was a cornerstone, not merely a source of heat, but a tool in its own right. Fire-hardened wooden spear tips, softened resin for adhesives, and transformed raw meat into digestible nourishment. But fire also required patience and skill to maintain. A small ember, carried in a bark container, could preserve fire during travel. If it died, relighting it required flint, dry tinder, and knowledge of flickering mastery over the elements. Adhesives were another subtle technology. Early humans used tree resins, heated and mixed with ash or ochre, to glue stone points to wooden shafts. This required not only ingredients, but experimentation, delicate recipe of heat, mixture, and timing. And then there were containers. Skins sewn into bags, hollowed gourds, baskets woven from grasses. These quiet inventions allowed for storage, transport, and even cooking. Hot stones dropped into water-filled skin bags could bring liquid to a simmer, long before the pot was ever imagined. Perhaps most remarkable was the use of cordage twine and rope twisted from plant fibers. Cord held together shelters, weapons, and clothing. It made fishing lines, traps, and nets. To twist two fibers into a strong, flexible rope requires a precise motion and an understanding of tension. This was technology not of the forge, but of the hands. And all of it was taught without writing. A child learned by watching, imitating, failing, and trying again. Generations passed down knowledge in rhythm and gesture, in shared tasks and quiet repetition. There were no blueprints, but there was memory. Even paint was a kind of technology. Pigments crushed and ground, bound with water or fat, applied with fingers, brushes, or even hollow bones as airbrushes. The knowledge to gather and mix these materials was part science, part art. So when you hear Stone Age, do not imagine a time of ignorance or stagnation. Picture instead a world of quiet invention, of people shaping their tools as they shape their lives carefully, patiently, with deep understanding of their materials and their needs. As you drift further into this world, let us move now toward a more sensual, cultural space. The role of music, of sound, of perhaps even the earliest hints of what we might one day call spirituality. In the stillness of the evening, a low hum rises. Not speech, but sound, slow, rhythmic, vibrating in the chest. A note is held, then answered. A hollow bone flute, simple yet haunting, releases a melody of just a few tones, echoing softly through the narrow mouth of a cave. Around the fire, others listen not with expectation, but with stillness. This is not performance. It is participation. Music, in the Stone Age, may have been one of the earliest languages of emotion and meaning. Long before writing, or even complex speech, sound was a way to reach across the silence to soothe, to warn, to remember. The oldest known musical instruments are flutes, carved from bird bone and mammoth ivory, dating back over 40,000 years. Found in the hills of southern Germany, they suggest not only craftsmanship, but intention. Music was not accidental. It was sought out, repeated, shared. Perhaps these sounds mimicked birdsong. Perhaps they accompanied dances, or rituals, or simply filled the long dark evenings with something more than silence. A steady beat tapped on wood or stone, voices rising together in a shared breath. There may have been songs to mourn, songs to welcome the hunt, lullabies to soothe a restless child, chants to mark the rhythm of walking or the turning of the stars. But even beyond music, early humans likely carried within them the seeds of belief not in gods, perhaps, as we understand them now, but in forces unseen. The wind, the storm, the animals that gave themselves to the hunt. Fire itself may have seemed alive, hungry, warm, unpredictable. Graves offer clues. The careful placement of bodies, the inclusion of tools, ornaments and pigments, suggest a reverence for death, and possibly an idea that life did not end completely. In many burials, red ochre was sprinkled over the deceased, the color of blood, of life. Was this symbolic of rebirth, a return to the earth? Some scholars believe early humans may have practiced forms of animisms, the belief that everything has a spirit, the river, the stone, the animal, even the wind. In this worldview, one did not conquer nature, but coexisted with it. Each tree, each stream, was not an object, but a presence. Certain figures, later called shamans, may have served as guides between this world and the next. Through trance, perhaps aided by rhythm or plants, they entered altered states, seeking meaning, healing, or insight. The walls of caves, covered in layered symbols, may have been their canvas, a map of the spirit world, a dialogue with the unseen. And in these rituals, sound was central, a drumbeat echoing in the ribs, a chant rising and falling like the breath of the earth. Music connected the known and the unknown. It gave structure to mystery. Even the body may have been part of this expression. Body painting, piercing, ornamentational could have had spiritual meaning. A shell worn for memory, a pattern of pigment to mark a rite of passage. These were not just decorations, but identities woven in ritual. To modernize, these practices are distant, unknowable, but perhaps not so far removed. Even now, We sing to soothe. We mark transitions with symbols. We light fires and watch them dance, lost in their warmth. So imagine now, as you lie in the quiet, that distant sound, a flute's soft call in the dark, a heartbeat echoed in hands drumming against skin, a voice, low and steady, carrying an ancient song into the night. And from that voice, let us turn gently toward the passing of time. How did early humans experience change? How did the Stone Age end? And what came after? Change, in the Stone Age, did not come suddenly. There were no revolutions, no declarations or battles marking one era from the next. Time moved softly, like water over stone, wearing new paths, carving new lives in the most gradual of ways. The Stone Age is vast, spanning millions of years, from the earliest tools used by hominins to the moment when metal was first drawn from the earth. But even within this enormous stretch, change crept in, small, persistent, and deeply human. The earliest period, known as the Paleolithic, was defined by mobility. Bands of people moved through landscapes, following herds, searching for shelter, guided by the seasons. They shaped flint, tanned hides, and painted walls with images drawn from memory and myth. Then, slowly, came the Mesolithic transitional age. The ice sheets that once blanketed much of the world began to melt. Rivers changed course. Forests spread where tundra once lay. The animals shifted too, and with them, the people. Fishing became more common. New tools appeared: barbed harpoons, canoes, even the first dogs, tamed companions on the journey. It was still the Stone Age, but the pace of life subtly changed. Camps became more permanent, food more varied. A child might grow up not only hunting but gathering berries from bushes their mother had planted nearby, perhaps without fully realizing it. Then came a quiet revolution, not in violence, but in cultivation. Somewhere, perhaps in the Fertile Crescent, or in the shadowed valleys of the Yangtze, or the highlands of New Guinea, people began to plant deliberately, to save seeds, to return to the same spot, season after season. This was the dawn of the Neolithic, the new Stone Age. The tools were still of flint and obsidian, but life was slowly rooting itself. Villages emerged. Pottery appeared. Goats were penned. Wheat was harvested. It did not happen all at once, and not everywhere. Some people farmed, others still wandered. Some did both. But the pattern was beginning to change. With farming came surplus food that could be stored, traded, or controlled. With it came the first signs of inequality. Some had more, others less. Roles hardened. Leadership shifted from the wise to the powerful. Structures rose from the earthstone dwellings, arranged in clusters, their walls bearing the soot of daily fires and the wear of many feet. In places like Çatalhöyük, in present-day Turkey, people lived side by side in homes with no streets, climbing through roofs, sharing ovens, painting their walls with bulls, leopards, and human forms. It was still the Stone Age, but the ground beneath the future was already stirring. The Neolithic brought ceremony too. Great stone circles like Göbekli Tepe, and later, Stonehenge suggest a shift toward collective gathering, ritual, and shared memory. These monuments required planning, labor, and vision. They point towards something new, organized belief, and perhaps even social stratification. Eventually, around 5,000 years ago, the first metal tools emerged: bronze from copper and tin, sharper, stronger, longer lasting. With metal came a new world of warfare, trade, and monumental architecture. Cities rose, scripts were etched into clay, kings were crowned, and so the Stone Age faded, not into silence, but into legacy. But it did not vanish. Even today, in remote parts of the world, echoes of that ancient rhythm remain: people still hunting with bows, shaping stone tools, gathering roots from familiar paths. And within us all, too, lies something of the Stone Age, a mind shaped by millennia of watching the sky, hands that still know how to grasp, shape, build, a heart that remembers the warmth of fire and the comfort of a shared song. Now, as the journey nears its close, let us slow one final time to observe the physical world of the Stone Age: the homes, the shelters, the quiet, textured landscapes our ancestors called home. Imagine the horizon as it was then: vast, uncluttered, and profoundly silent. No roads etched across hillsides, no towers, no cities, just the curve of the land beneath a wide and open sky. The The Stone Age landscape was not untouched, but it was shaped with care and restraint. Forests stretched like oceans, grasslands rolled across plains, rivers wandered their courses with no banks to hem them in. This was the world as it had been for tens of thousands of years, a canvas of natural abundance, shifting with the seasons. And within this setting, early humans made their homes. Some sought shelter in caves, like the one we began in. These natural spaces offered protection from weather, predators, and time itself. Their ceilings bore the soot of countless fires. Their walls became galleries, altars, homes. The entrance to the cave was both threshold and watchpost, marking the divide between wildness and warmth. But caves were not the only homes. As people grew more settled, they began to build. In river valleys and sheltered clearings, they raised simple dwellings woven from the land around them. Wood formed frames. Reeds were bundled and thatched. Mud was pressed into walls and dried in the sun. Stones lined fire pits or formed the base of huts. One remarkable site, Skara Brae, located in the windswept Orkney Islands of Scotland, gives us a rare glimpse into Neolithic domestic life. There, stone-built homes over 5,000 years old sit nestled into the earth. Their walls still stand, waist-high, their hearths intact, their stone beds and shelves still in place. Pathways connect house to house, and even then, people lived not in isolation, but in quiet community. Within these spaces, the rhythm of life played out. Fires crackled, meals were shared, tools were sharpened. Children slept in corners, cradled by the slow hush of wind against thatched walls. Outside, the land itself was worked, even gently shaped. Stones were cleared for planting. Simple terraces held back hillsides. Footpaths followed the routes of animals. Over time, megaliths great, standing stones rose from the ground, alone or in circles. These were not homes, but places of gathering, perhaps for ritual, perhaps for memory. Their alignment with the sun and stars hints at a deep attention to the skies. Even graves were built into the landscape. Long barrows, stone-lined tombs, and burial mounds dot ancient countryside. These resting places often faced east, welcoming the dawn. The land, then, was not only lived in, it was woven with meaning. In colder regions, people dug pit houses, half submerged in the earth to preserve warmth. Roofs of hide and bone stretched over wooden frames. These dwellings, though temporary, were thoughtful, built in response to wind, to sun, to season. Everything was made by hand. Everything came from the nearby world. And when people moved on, they left little behind, just charcoal, a few stone flakes, a worn path. There was no waste, no noise, only the slow whisper of time across grass and stone. And so we returned to where we began, the shelter of a cave, the hush of morning, the fire low, the light soft, a world pared down to its essentials, yet full of quiet purpose and enduring craft. Now, let us close our eyes one final time and drift gently into the space between past and present. A final reflection awaits. And now, as the fire in our ancient cave burns low once more, as shadows deepen along the stone walls, and the soft hush of night settles in, we step gently back away from the world of flint and fir, of bone tools and ochre hands. The Stone Age, for all its distance, was never barren. It was full with effort, with quiet innovation, with meaning carved not into pages, but into the very texture of daily life. Its people were not nameless brutes wandering through a grim wilderness. They were thinkers, makers, feelers. They knew the land intimately. They sang to it, shaped it, listened to it. They walked barefoot across dew-covered grass. They tracked the stars not with charts, but with memory. They raised their children without calendars or clocks, without books or borders. And yet they loved. They lost. They endured. They left behind no written records. But their marks remain in charcoal lines that still cling to cave walls, in the shape of a flaked hand axe, in the red dust of a burial floor. In every corner of the world, there are stones that once warmed someone's sleep, bones that once bore the weight of laughter or labor, fragments of a past that was not silent, only slow. Tonight, as you lie still in your own shelter, perhaps beneath soft sheets or the low hum of distant traffic, you are connected to that past. Your hands, your breath, the rise and fall of your chest in the dark, these things have not changed so very much. And perhaps, if you listen closely, you might hear something old and steady in the rhythm of your own heartbeat, a song older than memory, a pattern shaped by firelight. So rest now. The world has turned many times. The flint has dulled, the paint has faded, but the echoes remain. Sleep well, dream deep, and let the past keep you company. Good night.